Hello and welcome to Connect. I'm your host, Randy Shabilo. On today's show, we'll be speaking with some University of Saskatchewan students about the Ukrainian Holodomor and getting an update from the Greater Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce. As always, we'd like to connect with you.
Tweet us at ShawTV Saskatoon, find us on Facebook, or email shawtvconnect@shaw.ca. You can also watch previous interviews on Shaw TV's YouTube channel at youtube.com/ShawTV Saskatoon.
The commemoration of the Holodomor is taking place at the end of November, and I've asked two University of Saskatchewan students, Prychak and Nykole to come by and give us some insight into the commemoration and a little bit of history. So first of all, thank you for making time today and coming to join us.
Absolutely, thanks for having us.
Maybe, Tanner, start with you in some of the historical context of, some people call it a genocide, and it's had some recognition. Maybe go back and bring us to where this all started.
Well, the 1920s, as I said, was a period where Ukrainian culture was flourishing. Ukrainian language was legal. They were allowed to speak their languages. The arts were flourishing. Poets, writers were able to publish their works in the Ukrainian language. And actually, before 1917, I believe, to 1919, Ukraine actually enjoyed a brief period of independence. And this whole period of what some call Ukrainianization was used as by the Bolshevik ruling party as a means to foster support from indigenous peoples like the Ukrainians, obviously, and other non-Russian groups living in the Soviet Union. However, in the 1930s, this all changed. You have all of this progress made in Ukrainian culture just stamped out. Ukrainian language not allowed, only the Russian language is allowed to be spoken in schools. And
it seems like that's kind of permeated over the years, and we look at the situation today, it's also very troubling in Crimea and places like that. Maybe Nykole, if you can touch a little bit about the genocide that started to happen. What was Stalin doing at that time? I guess take us back into the 20s and 30s in that period of time.
Of course. So during that Ukrainianization, Stalin was concerned that the Ukrainians were a little bit too pro-nationalist and that they might be detrimental to the Soviet state. So the genocide was it was intended to be a suppression of the Ukrainian nationalist spirit. So what was done was that there was mass collectivization where they would take the grain from the Ukrainian people, and there were quotas to fill, and usually their grain would be ported to Russia and to Poland and other neighboring countries. And often farm families were left with almost nothing to eat. So there was mass starvation, and many children suffered as a consequence of that and perished, unfortunately.
And that's not just a mistake. This is a deliberate attempt by Stalin at the time to suppress the people and to stop that uprising. Any idea of the numbers involved in terms of the people that died and the population of Ukraine at the time?
well, that's the thing with the numbers. It's very difficult to establish a set number just because of how well it's been suppressed and a lack of access to archives in Russia as to how many people actually died, but highest estimates today range from 7 to 10 million lives.
And I think that's a key point to touch on, because if we look at the last census in 2011, as a for instance, in Western Canada from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, there's just over 10 million in the population. So that's in effect, I guess, Manitoba West wiping out the Canadian population. So it is significant. What has happened since that time with that suppression of the people, the genocide? What's happened in Ukraine to get us to where we are today?
Well, there was quite a bit of propaganda surrounding the famine. Stalin tried to not let any information out of the USSR concerning the famine. When dignitaries would visit, he would show them the countrysides that were doing well, that were still prospering. So many countries didn't know at the time what was going on. And so this propaganda just kept going and going for centuries. And there were survivors who were saying, no, this happened to me. This needs to be realized. And I think that a lot of the migrants from Ukraine in Saskatchewan and Canada, they realized that their families had been touched by the famine, and they knew survivors, and that this needed to be recognized.
And what happened when that was discovered and more of the truth started to come out from people that weren't afraid to speak out? What started to happen?
Well, around Canada, there was a bill that was going around that people were signing, trying to get the government to recognize the famine as genocide, which is significantly important because Stalin rewrote history in a way. He tweaked facts and made it seem like it was just environmental factors, that it was not their fault, which is mistaken because it was a man-made famine. So the push from survivors and family and Ukrainians in the community really helped bring that to the limelight.
When we look at the recognition that it's been started to be recognized by other governments, and we'll take Canada for instance, what essentially happened with Canada acknowledging it finally? Was it the public pressure, or how did that happen?
I would say it was public pressure and champions from the Ukrainian community who are in government, like the Honorable Senator Andreychuk. She also helped push the Senate to accept this and let the legislation go through. And also in Saskatchewan, we were the first to recognize the famine genocide. MP Ken Kravitz, he was also significant for it as well. He pushed the legislation, and the community really helped support those champions of the Ukrainian community.
Why is it important then that it's something that be remembered by not just the Ukrainian community, but why is it important for others to recognize that as well?
I'd say that the memory of the Holodomor is still felt today. Like, it's not difficult to find people in our own community who have ties to Holodomor survivors, like their grandfathers or their great-grandparents had survived the Holodomor. And I feel it's very important to have this recognized because of all the denial that's going on. Even today, it's very easy to find people, even in Canada, who deny the existence of the Holodomor as a genocide, where they'll say, oh, well, it was just a famine. There were famines all over the USSR where, yeah, and the Russian government today still denies this famine.
And they won't acknowledge that to some degree. So the goal of Stalin at that time was to, I guess, suppress the Ukrainian movement and to maintain control of the USSR. Important to recognize what was done. Why is that something that I see a new generation in front of me? Why is it important for you to not celebrate, commemorate that maybe?
Okay. Well, I think it's important for not only the Ukrainian community to understand historical events, especially mass genocides like this, because this can happen to anyone around the globe. I mean, totalitarian governments can take freedoms and rights away from people like that. And unless we are aware of it and we use all that we can to bring awareness and to support and aid these people, then nothing's going to be done. Lives are just going to be lost meaninglessly.
We've heard it said that even something like Crimea, there were Russian-speaking people living there, but if you go back to something like this, we're understanding that there was an infiltration of the Russian population into Ukraine at that time too. So there's been generations of people that have been there, and that might, I guess, be to some point why we're starting to see that as being Russian territory, because it was infiltrated back then. What do you see going forward in the next couple of years in terms of recognizing it? There's a Holodomor bus that was here. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, they have a video that's played for students, and they have artifacts like memoirs from survivors, maybe like pieces of clothing, things like that, that students can look at and they can understand Holodomor through more of a personal experience, I think. The video really helps tie it in, and so that students can understand the historical context and that these weren't just people across the planet far away, that these were people who maybe were in your community that suffered the consequences of this.
I can't imagine being in university and of university age. This wouldn't be something that would come up in a discussion. Just hi, you want to talk about the Holodomor? How is that starting to emerge as a point of topic of discussion amongst the generation of your peers?
About the time that I started university, the Civil War happened in Ukraine, and I was taking Ukrainian language classes, so that was kind of a big topic at the time. That was the first time that I learned about the Holodomor, and I was learning about the Civil War at the time. So I was talking with my friends about this, other friends of Ukrainian heritage, friends of not Ukrainian heritage. It was a big thing on my mind. So I think the recent events have definitely been a factor.
I guess social media would come into play, something like that as well. If we were to look at any events that we wanted to make people aware of that are going to be happening or occurring, is there something you can tell us about, something that people would be able to attend or read about or hear about in the next few weeks or so?
Well, on campus, our University of Saskatchewan Ukrainian Students Association, or USUSA simply, will, in the last full week of November, we will be having 2 events. On the 22nd, which I believe is a Tuesday, we will be having a film night, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. at St. Thomas More, the auditorium in St. Thomas More, Father O'Donnell Auditorium, yeah. We'll be playing a documentary which just provides various eyewitness accounts of the Holodomor. You'll be able to hear firsthand what these people went through. And 2 days after that, on the 24th, we'll be having a vigil at the Lesy Ukrainka statue, which is just outside of the Murray Library on campus again at 12:30 p.m.
Perfect. Tanner and Nykole, I want to thank you both for making time and sharing that important news with us, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you for having us.
Good. We'll be right back.